in the wake of the trade deadline, it became clear to me just how significant and how hard Minnesota tried to get Kevin Durant at the trade deadline. Now, it was a Herculean effort because both of those teams were in the second apron, but there was a point in this year where Minnesota was very interested in making this happen.
Okay. I had to re-record this intro and re-record the outro because news just broke about the Minnesota Timberwolves that is going to change the landscape entirely next season if they're able to pull off this monumental trade during the offseason. Now, what exactly am I talking about? Well, as we all know, we just witnessed Minnesota get bounced out in the conference finals by the hands of the Oklahoma City Thunder, and despite the disappointment, I have to admit, I am fairly impressed by this organization. Last year, the Timberwolves burst on the scene of relevancy in large part due to the rising stardom of their then 22-year-old guard in Anthony Edwards. Now, I would be doing Minnesota a huge disservice if I made it seem as if like it was just Ant-Man that made him relevant. No. For the first time in a very long time, Minnesota actually did an excellent job building around their star. The perfect blend of youthfulness and experience with a fold of offensive weaponry that I think a lot of people were not anticipating, but undeniably, I believe the identity of Minnesota was their defense, and that could not have been escaped after they added Rudy Gobert to the roster. Now, adding Gobert to the team certainly left a lot of people scratching their head on exactly what this team was going to look like with their front court lacking a lot of spacing. However, a lot of that doubt was really thrown right out the window after Minnesota was able to beat the defending champions that was led by a three-time league MVP with Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets in the second round. But unfortunately after that, a lot of that doubt started to creep right back into place because they lost in the conference finals to Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and the Dallas Mavericks in 5 games. And then in the offseason, they decided to trade Karl-Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks and in return received Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. A move that to this day many people still question, why exactly would you do this? Towns had an amazing year, especially in the first 2 rounds. Why blow up something to seem to have been a winning formula? And trust me when I say in about a month and a half, you'll realize why. But regardless, Julius, Dante added to a team that made it to the conference finals. Expectations were high, but many people still did not believe that Minnesota had the same status that they had in the Western Conference last year. But boy, did they completely prove a lot of people wrong. In large part due to the historically great three-point shooting season that we got out of Anthony Edwards, Julius Randle was significantly better than I think a lot of people anticipated. And also, both Dante and Nas, after struggling in the first half of the season, really turned it around in the second half, and that was the overall theme for Minnesota towards the tail end of the regular season. Unfortunately, not enough people really discussed this and talked about it, including myself, my bad, and it's a huge reason why a lot of people were surprised that they were able to make quick work of the Los Angeles Lakers in the first round. The second round was certainly easier for them to skate by after Curry went down in game 1, winning 4 straight, concluding that series in 5 games as well. But here we are, once again, and Minnesota's season concludes in the conference finals in 5 games, which then, of course, kind of breeds this question on what exactly is next for Minnesota, because this type of failure, if you will, cannot be reoccurring for a rising star in Anthony Edwards and a roster that seems more than adequate enough to compete at that level. Well, first, let's go ahead and just address the elephant in the room, and that is the Towns trade with the addition of Julius Randle. I know I kind of talked about what you're going to witness in about a month and a half, but just letting you know, the reason why he did it is because of the second tax apron. You can thank CJ McCollum for breaking up so many happy homes and franchises in the NBA, because boy, does it suck. It sucks. It really does suck. You have Minnesota. They are in a situation to where they're going to have to sign both Naz Reid and Nikhil long-term in this upcoming summer. They knew this, and they knew it was practically impossible to do so if they kept Towns on the roster. So they brought in Randle, who this year is the last guaranteed year left on his contract. He does have an option next year, but this is the last guaranteed year, and so that gave him a lot more financial flexibility. Now, in terms of Naz, I personally believe this season he was fantastic, regardless of his struggles periodically throughout the playoffs. He was great, very pivotal not only to their success, but more specifically the floor spacing that they needed in those small ball lineups at times. And I do believe there is a bit of defensive responsibility and impact that he has to this roster that goes underneath the radar a little too often. Now, when it comes to Nikhil, I'm not 100% sure. And I'm not just saying it just because I'm a Laker fan and I wouldn't mind him having on my roster. Now, you know what I'm saying? I would love Nikhil in the backcourt with Luka and, LeBron. I would love that. But I'm more so saying that because of, again, the financial commitment that they have to make, as well as what Nikhil did in the playoffs. For the second postseason run in a row, Nikhil's three-point shooting really didn't translate as well. He struggled mightily, and I do believe that was a huge reason why this team wasn't able to capitalize on some of the opportunities that they seen with OKC, especially in the first two games. And also, I don't believe that it was a coincidence that they went after Dante DiVincenzo during the Towns trade in the offseason last year. I do believe Dante is a bit of an insurance that if they cannot retain Nikhil long term, then they have his replacement effectively. But that kind of then brings us to the whole Julius Randle conundrum. Now, I'm trying to be overall positive because Randle had a really, really great year. He missed a couple of games in the regular season. That's all understandable, but way better three-point shooter than we originally anticipated. Way better just jump shooter overall. Offensively, I thought he was really sound, really good passer, decision maker, and a lot of that stuff kind of carried over into the first two rounds as well. But we saw a lot of that Julius Foolius, playoff Julius, a player that a lot of us was a bit apprehensive to embrace when he got on his roster, all in the conference finals. It was all on display, man. The three-point shooting wasn't falling. The bad decision-making was there. Handling the ball and trying to create against elite-level defenders, that doesn't really make any sense. But the worst part of the Julius Randle experience is the lack of effort that he tends to give when it feels as if like he's just defeated. Now, do I believe his performance against OKC was so bad that teams are not going to look out for him in free agency, or that he's all of a sudden going to be unmovable? No, I actually believe this season was a massive positive for Randle. His value certainly should be trending in a different direction, and there will be several suitors for him in this upcoming offseason. Now, are those suitors going to be title contending teams? Probably not, but I can certainly see a couple of organizations that are looking to make a transition, improve their roster, especially those who are desperate enough that can convince themselves that he is a piece that will make them better. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. But with that being said, I do believe a lot of this contract dialogue that surrounds the Minnesota Timberwolves with Towns and now Randle, in my opinion, is allowing a lot of people to ignore the much larger elephant in the room. No pun intended. Stop making the fat jokes. But the much bigger issue that a lot of people seem to not want to address isn't Towns, isn't Randle, it's Rudy Gobert. I'm sorry, but enough is enough. I am not on the bandwagon of people who love to just slander Rudy Gobert. How dare he win DPOY? I'm not on that bandwagon. Trust me, I'm not. But I'm also not on the bandwagon of people who just want to look at calculator stats and spreadsheets and completely ignore how much of a detriment he is to this roster. Yes, Rudy Gobert is an elite level defender. And yes, there are times over these past two seasons where his defensive impact can scale to all-time status, especially with this roster that surrounds him with the proper athletes and defensive personnel. Absolutely. However, that level of impact is not shown enough in the postseason, and on top of that, his impact in the postseason certainly does not erase how bad he is on the other side of the floor. I'm sorry, but watching a 7-foot player struggle to contain the ball like he has other mitts on his hands, where he can't grab a rebound, he functionally can't dribble, he barely can make the right reads, and he can't even finish at the rim despite the fact that he's 7 feet tall. I just watched Rudy Gobert hover around 35% on his layups this postseason run. 35%. Now, to be fair to Gobert, this is the last year on his previous deal where he was making like 40 plus million. Moving forward, he's only making around 30 to 35, so that certainly should help them. However, there are several different options out there where you can get someone for probably $10 million less than what Gobert is expected to make in the upcoming years, such as a Jared Allen or a Jakob Poeltl, who I don't believe that they are as good as Gobert defensively. But what I am saying is that you're still going to get a lot of impact defensively. You're going to get a better offensive player. And moreover, you're basically going to get a player who plays a very similar role at a $10 million pay cut. That's what you're effectively going to receive with Jakob Poeltl or Jared Allen. So I think that should be on the table. Also, the fact that Rudy Gobert, I believe, is like 33 right now, going on 34. He's getting up there in age. Replacing him would also make a lot of sense. So I think you had to take all things into consideration, especially for what Minnesota is rumored to do in this upcoming offseason, and that is trading for Kevin Durant. News broke today that not only will Minnesota make a really big push for Kevin Durant during the offseason, but they were looking to try to trade KD during the deadline that just passed by, which really is mind-blowing because that means that Minnesota has already pieced together a package to get the job done. They were already willing to move off of some of these pieces that got them to the conference finals for Kevin Durant. So, in all honesty, it's probably all sketched in stone as we speak. And even though, yes, it will be very complicated to pull this off, thanks to the new CBA, as well as how much money KD is making, which is upwards of $50+ million. However, it's still possible to get it done, which is why it was all very important for me to talk about all the problems that Minnesota had leading up into where we are right now. Piecing together a sign and trade deal with Julius Randle and Nikhil, and potentially moving off of Rudy Gobert to bring in someone else who can fulfill the same role to give them a $10 million cushion to then bring in KD, all makes sense. And unlike many other people who try to piece together trade package for Kevin Durant, I actually believe this makes sense for both parties. Kind of already explained it for Minnesota. They'll have the replacement for Nikhil if they end up losing him with Dante. Randle was certainly temporary, and I do believe he exceeded expectations, but clearly isn't the best fit for this roster, especially if they want the proper floor spacing in that front court. And then when it comes to KD, I don't really think I need to explain to people why Kevin Durant is a really good piece to this team. Even if you don't believe that he's a top 10 player, at worst, he's like 12 or 13. He will provide the floor spacing that Towns gave them last year, being a way better shot creator, passer, playmaker. I don't think I need to explain to you why KD would be good on his roster. I also believe he's a better team defender than both Randle and Towns. I don't even believe that he is. He's a better team defender than both Randle and Towns. But more importantly, one of the bigger issues that we saw this postseason run, and even last year as well, is that Anthony Edwards is at a point in his career where he is still growing and maturing, especially as a passer and playmaker. There is a lot of his game that is extremely immature. He misses a lot of mid-range jump shots, and I do mean a lot of them. And even though he has a very high ceiling and a lot of potential, I do believe he needs someone to go alongside him to not only help him from a veteran perspective, but just in terms of personnel as well. And there was way too many times when I was watching him against the Thunder where they were just loading up on him and making it extremely difficult. I certainly understand why so many people get upset with this idea that Ant is supposed to be the next superstar face of the league because he gets the Michael Jordan comparisons. But personally, I'm not going to slander Ant just because somebody else decides to put that on him. I do believe he has a lot of room to grow, and adding KD to this roster will give him not only a player to learn from, but more importantly, someone on the same floor with him that can relieve a lot of that pressure so he can have room to grow and learn from his mistakes much more easier than he's had over the past 2 years. And then in terms of Phoenix, you can add a defensive-oriented backcourt mate with Devin Booker with Nikhil. And then you have Julius Randle, who's grown, as we've already talked about, as someone who's a shot maker, someone who's a three-point shooter, a passer as well. But more importantly, that grit and grind that supposedly Matt Ishbia is looking for in terms of moving a different direction, which is something that he spoke about pretty candidly throughout the past couple of months since they did not make a postseason appearance. I believe it makes sense for both parties. You probably have to put in a couple more contracts just because how much money KD makes, and I don't necessarily know all the dynamics in the second tax apron. If I'm not mistaken, both of these teams are in the second tax apron, so more than likely a third team would have to get involved. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if they move off of Rudy Gobert for someone else who makes around $10 million less, just so they can, again, give themselves the cap flexibility to add KD. But regardless of what they need to do, they need to get it done. Having a roster that features Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, whoever that defensive five is going to be, and KD certainly puts them in the driver's seat to compete with the Oklahoma City Thunder heading into next season, and certainly will make this Western Conference that's already extremely competitive even more so. And I think it's actually a perfect fit for a Timberwolves team that's trying to capitalize on where they're at right now. But I will say this. If they have to lose Naz Reid or any other valuable piece of their rotation to get the job done, I say don't do it. The one thing I have learned throughout this postseason run is that defense and lineup utility is probably the most valuable thing that you can have going forward, especially in this new CBA. Having a top-heavy team with just 2 stars and 3 or 4 other players in your rotation, that's not going to be good enough. Make sure you're able to still keep a 7-8-man rotation, go out there, fill out the rest of the roster accordingly, and keep yourself extremely flexible with the different lineups that you can run. Don't fall for the same trap that everybody else has been falling for over the past 2 to 3 years, just trying to build super teams up. Don't do that. But hey, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment section below. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.